In the original game, the sixth world was Pluto. Ironically, though, despite being the smallest planet, Pluto was the largest and most diverse world in the whole game. Entropy had a different layout, but was similarly huge and diverse. The board music was played by a violin-like instrument. A melody that started out sounding mournful, and then it gets rather, I guess I would call it distorted. It made me feel depressed and unnerved, not something I would want to hear while trying to sleep. Strangely, none of the level from the previous worlds were present here. Instead, there were 8 brand new icons. The bosses this time were Megalon, Batra, and Mecha Godzilla. As usual, the first thing I did was go to the quiz level for another interrogation of face. But when I got there, I noticed something different. Instead of the usual goofy Ghidorah music, it was the password theme. The music change seemed to be intentional because after the first 2 questions at the start, the quiz started to become darker. Do you like ice cream? Yes. Face's reaction, weird face number 1. Do you like clowns? Yes. Face's reaction, weird face number 10. Is time slipping through your fingers? Yes. Face's reaction, weird face number 2. Do you have any regrets? Yes. Face's reaction, hurt. Do some people deserve to die? No. Face's reaction, weird face number 3. Is it safe to go out at night? Yes. Face's reaction, weird face number 5. Do you find it hard to sleep at night? Yes. Face's reaction, weird face number 9. Have you ever killed anyone? No. Face's reaction, weird face number 7. Do you want to kill anyone? No. Face's reaction, angry. Are you actually accomplishing anything? No. Face's reaction, weird face number 4. Does life have any real meaning? No. Face's reaction, love. Do you like Mothra? No. Face's reaction, maniacal. I knew that last one was going to be a game-related question, but I had no idea what the result would be. I answered honestly because, as I said before, I never liked Mothra. Nobody liked playing as Mothra in this game, and there was a good reason for that. Every other time Mothra gets hit, she gets slammed back to the left corner on the screen, and she sucks at fighting because her attacks are so weak. The only benefit Mothra had was being able to fly over obstacles in some levels. So I answered no. And Face actually replied back to me, not only with his maniacal expression, but with the text. Too bad. I was taken back to the map screen, and I was shocked to see that Godzilla and Anguirus had disappeared from the board, leaving only Mothra. Face just screwed me over. Needless to say, I was pissed. But there wasn't anything I could do, and I'm willing to bet even if I had said yes, I would have been stuck with Mothra anyway. Face giveth, and face taketh away. Took a deep breath and got ready to explore. There were 2 paths I could take through the board. I decided to take the lower one. This turned out to be a good choice for reasons I'll get to momentarily. The first world ahead of me was a forest, so I started there. Almost immediately, I got an eerie feeling. There was something about this level that just seemed off to me, even more than the previous ones. Perhaps it was a pitch black background? I've been afraid of being in a forest at night. Something about all those trees makes me feel surrounded and vulnerable. And the fact that I was stuck as Mothra didn't help. Playing the game's previous worlds as Godzilla gave me a feeling of bravery. Being in control of the king of the monsters, I'd be able to handle just about anything in my way. But it's not like that with Mothra. No feeling of strength or security. I'm just a weak, easily overwhelmed bug, traversing into the unknown. Back to the level though. The music had new instruments, sounding like woodwinds, followed by slow, rhythmic drums and chiming bells. Gave me this feeling that I was intruding into something dangerous, like a dangerous place I really should not be. After a while, I encountered the first enemies of the stage, or at least I assumed they were enemies. They were strange, long-legged deer-like creatures. Instead of attacking, they were just idly walking around. I went to approach them and they ran away. I thought about shooting them with an eye beam to see what would happen, but it seemed very wrong. These creatures were harmless, so I passed over them and continued through the level. About halfway through, I encountered a group of small deer-like animals and also two new creatures, a sloth-like creature with a beak climbing on a tree, and a hairy raptor-esque beasts that were preying on the deer. It was very surreal watching these creatures interact. It didn't feel like I was playing a video game, but rather that I was traveling through a forest in some other dimension. The creatures ignored me for the most part, although the raptors did attack me when I got too close, or if I attacked them first. I know I shot one of them to help one of the deer creatures escape. I got clawed at, but confrontation was easily avoided by flying to the top of the screen. After that, I had to choose whether I wanted to play the levels with an hourglass or the TV screen. I picked the latter. What I got was not at all expected. When I pressed the button at the start of the level on the TV screen like I normally would, the screen with an animation popped up. There was also music in the background, which was the goofy Ghidorah music that used to be playing in the quiz levels. I was somewhat unsettled by this. It was just so strange. I also found it a bit spooky because I had a shirt that looked just like that when I was a kid. After starting the animation, you could go back to the board by pressing any button. After that, I had no idea what to expect with the rest of these icons. I went to try an hourglass icon next. I was somewhat relieved when an actual level came up. It was certainly an orthodox looking level, all brown, with time measuring instruments floating in the air and gigantic grandfather clocks in the background. The music was the same as the board screen. And very early in the game, I encountered something else I didn't expect to see. Original enemies from Godzilla Monster of Monsters. And not just that, it seemed to be a whole fleet of them, and the yellow tanks, which were normally immobile, could now move. I took some damage, but it was nothing I couldn't handle. But the most interesting thing about this level was the colored hourglass items. There were 3 of these. One, a blue hourglass that made time slow down and filled the levels with enemies from the past. Number 2, a red hourglass that made time speed up and filled the level with enemies from the future. Number 3, a green hourglass that set time to normal speed and filled the level with original game enemies. I encountered the blue hourglass first. As I started, the game started to slow down, and I saw the enemies from the past, which were 5 different types of prehistoric animals. I don't know much about prehistory, but I believe all these animals represent real animals. The level went into another segment, and I encountered the green hourglass, and then I fought the original enemies again. It was the same 5 types, so I didn't take any screenshots. But in the last segment, I encountered the red hourglass, and the enemies that must have been from the futures. Now, whether or not the game was showing me 8-bit renditions of creatures that actually will exist, thousands of years in the Earth's future, I have no idea. But with that in mind, I found this particular segment to be very eerie, and it was made more tense because everything moved faster. One of the future enemies bore a striking resemblance to something I saw in a book once called Trudon Man. Another looked like some kind of organic spaceship. There was only one of the fifth type of future creatures, and when it appeared, all the others ran for their lives, leaving me alone to battle it. It could fly, but its sprite didn't actually move, and its single attack was firing a lightning bolt from its face. Even so, it was surprisingly powerful, and I suppose it could have been considered a mini-boss. After defeating it, it left a health power-up that restored my health and energy I had lost fighting it, which was convenient. It seemed I would need all the help I could get to beat this world with just Mothra. Well, after the previous stage, which I call Time Warp, the next stage appeared to be a toxic waste dump. As you can see, it looked grungy and inhospitable. The music was a short looping of an ambient synthesizer song. Listening to it made me feel like I had sniffed some toxic fumes myself, and it was messing with my head the whole time. I even felt like I was choking while playing this level. The enemies all seem to be mutated to some degree. In the above screenshot, you can see green mummies with bird skulls that jump out of the waste and spit projectiles. There's also a brownish cow skeleton monster with spider legs. Halfway through the level, I even saw one of the deer from the forest. It was alone, and when I saw it, it was drinking toxic waste out of a barrel with an anteater-like tongue. I was moving over to try to make it stop. A flock of skullbirds came out of nowhere and started attacking. The deer was scared by this and ended up running off into the toxic waste. I feel bad for it. One of the birds bit me, but I regained health quick from killing them. They were rather weak. I pressed onward. Of all the levels in Entropy, this is probably the most normal, in that there was little deviance from the moving forward smash things formula in the original game. I encountered more creatures through the level, like tentacled blobs, and some kind of deformed thing with a human teeth. I didn't feel like provoking them into a fight, so I kept flying near the top of the screen. I started to deal with the occasional flock of birds now and then. At the end of the level, there was a large bluish-green lake, and there I encountered another mini-boss, some kind of monster with a long neck and whale skull. It attacks with mouth projectiles, and by charging into you. It also could go underneath the water and rapidly emerge from a different place. It was harder to beat than the boss at the Time Warp, and it had a lot of health because it must have taken 3 minutes to defeat it. It let out a loud noise when it died, and then sank back into the water as I left the screen. Back on the board, I went to the nearest level icon I hadn't seen yet, which was a white tree. As I guessed, the level was a winter-themed recolor of the forest stage. But unlike the regular forest, I didn't feel unnerved starting this one. I think the music had a lot to do with it. It was a gentle, calm song. It almost sounded romantic. It was quite stress relieving, and the forest itself looked much less ominous, covered in snow. I traveled through the first segment, enjoying the atmosphere for 4 minutes, when suddenly I realized something. I haven't seen a single creature since I started the level. Where are all the animals? Soon after I left the screen, the next segment started. The second segment, I was still in the winter forest, but now the music was gone. I was starting to feel suspicious, but then I reminded myself that there were other empty levels in the game, and this was another one of those. But then I heard something familiar. It was a 12-second loop from the music, Unforgiving Cold, starting up. I could feel my heart sink as I came across this horrible sight. It was a whole group of dead deer creatures covered in snow. Judging by the blackish blue tone of their skin, they must have been frozen to death. On closer inspection, some were missing body parts. Now I was frightened, but I still had to keep moving. Before exiting the level, I was really hoping to see something resembling previous forest animals in a living state, and sure enough I did. It was a creature much like the beaked sloth, except this thing had white fur and was more like a beaked gorilla. It was walking very slowly when I saw it, but I was happy to see at least something alive. However, it didn't stay that way for long. A pack of raptors, who must have sensed something else was still alive, came rushing in at the right side of the screen. The beaked gorilla didn't stand a chance, as one of the raptors immediately lunged at it, ripped open its back legs. These winter raptors acted far different from their temperate relatives. While the other raptors only attacked while hunting prey or when provoked, the winter raptors seemed to have all gone insane. They attacked everything in sight. One was running back and forth, clawing at nothing. Even the noises they made sounded different, more high-pitched and enraged. As I left the second segment, I saw two raptors fighting to the death. They were both covered in injuries, and one of the raptors had been blinded in one eye. I took a screenshot, but didn't see who won the fight. I only had to get through one more segment before I could go back to the board screen. But in this segment, I was no longer in the winter forest, but instead, a very grassy plain and a bright gray moon in the sky. The pleasant music from Winter Forest Part 1 had returned, and immediately I started to feel dread. I know this is going to sound crazy, but it's the absolute truth. The game made this level for my memories. After a long stretch of nothing, I reached a lake, and then the moon moved down from the sky and began to hatch like an egg. When it did, a curled-up humanoid figure fell into the lake as the moon halves quickly disintegrated. I heard a splash when it hit the water, and then a moment of silence. Then the screen began to shake, and a new creature emerged from the water. And thus I was introduced to a monster I call the Moon Beast. This was the only screenshot I could take, as I was focusing on all my concentration on winning the fight, and it was the most difficult fight yet. Stronger than any of the previous bosses, this creature would have been hard to take down with even Godzilla, and with Mothra, it was nearly impossible. I suppose I can consider myself fortunate that the beast only lacked any attacks like Gigan saw, because if that would have been it, I would have never won this. I barely had 3 bars of health when I finally killed this super abomination. But what happened afterward was hardly what I could call an award. I've been trying to keep my promise and suppress this memory for years, but it seems as if I have to get this off my chest. This was a very painful memory for me, but the game already knows about it, and I think you guys should too. I'll just tell you all the important parts, because I don't like bringing this strange back into my head unless I have to. Back when I was in middle school, I had a girlfriend named Melissa. She suffered from some kind of mental disorder that caused her to go into episodes. When she was in an episode, she would just stand or sit perfectly straight and still, and her face would instantly lose any expression she had before. She would speak very clearly without any hint of emotion. When it was over, she would start trembling and sometimes bury her face in her hands, and remain silent for several minutes. I can't really convey the feeling it gave to me in words, and I won't try. You had to see this in person to understand. But despite this, she was a very kind person, and I cared dearly for her. We liked to hang out in the field at night and look at the stars, but one night she didn't say anything to me at all. She just stared directly at the moon, trembling. I tried to talk to her, but she suddenly sprung up and run into traffic. I tried to stop her, I really did, but it was too late. She got hit by a truck and was killed that night. I looked her right in the eyes when the wheels went over her neck. The sight has always haunted me. I know that game knows because after I defeated the moon beast, this happened. After that, the game went back to the board screen. It was all I could do, just not to burst out screaming. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the NES controller. I knew the game was going to test me if I kept playing, but I had no idea it would go so far, or that it was even capable of doing what it just did. I could feel my brain going haywire as I asked myself, did the game really just read my mind? That's impossible, but what other explanation was there? It was then that I could no longer deny what seemed obvious. This game is alive, and not only that, it could also establish some kind of mental connection with the player, and yet I couldn't convince myself to stop playing. I don't know if it was the game messing with my mind or just my stubborn curiosity, but even with the previous revelation, I really wanted to see this through to the end, even more than I did when I beat Dementia. Terrifying as it might be, even dangerous, I knew if I quit playing, I would never be able to stop thinking about it. If I tried to restart the game, it might go back to being normal again. How many people ever get to witness something like this firsthand, let alone be able to take screenshots of this whole thing? As screwed up as it was the experience of a lifetime. But even so, I couldn't take any chances with my health. I had the TV remote right next to me, ready to turn the TV off in case I felt in any actual danger. And if that didn't work, I'd pull the plug out of the wall, or just run out of the room. Surely that would be enough. Whatever powers the game has, it seemed to be confined to what can show on the TV, and whatever its mental connection could do, the latter was what worried me. I still don't know what I'm dealing with, so I wasn't about to underestimate it. I took a break for a few minutes to calm my nerves, and then it was back to the game. And speaking of TVs, there's a TV screen icon right below the white forest I had just left. And because the first animation was so bizarre, I figured I'd try another one to see what happens. Although I expect the same animation, I actually got a totally different one. Weird. The music for this one was the Neptune board music. Fitting, I suppose, since it's a fish man and all. I can't help but wonder, what is the point of these things? There was one more TV screen icon, so I figured it must have been a unique animation of its own. I was going to make sure to see what it was before I left Entropy. But then, it's time for another level. The gold brick icon was the closest thing, so I went to that and started up in a gold labyrinth level. My health and power was refilled, not sure why, but I was glad to not be heading into the unknown nearly dead. I also noticed that my Mothra sprite had shrunk half its original size. The music was slow, ominous drum beat, with female vocals kicking in about a minute into it. It was quite haunting. The gold labyrinth itself was an anomaly. I'm not sure how this would have played out if I was using Godzilla or Anguirus, because flying seemed necessary just to get around this place. Another thing that caught my attention was when you go to the left, your monster actually turns and faces the left. That sounds stupid and obvious, but in the original game, you were only supposed